Good news, you don't need to post every day. Here's the real answer. Teams and students are oftentimes comparing themselves to bigger powerhouse creators or people they see on social media that are posting daily. And the reason why these bigger content creators can do that is because they have teams behind them that are working at this 24/7 as their full-time job. But being in robotics, you know that this is not your full-time job. In fact, you're not getting paid to do this at all. Or at least if you are, you should definitely let me know because I'd love to get in on that. But all kidding aside, if you start to compare yourself to these content creators that you're seeing online, you're going to overwhelm yourself. And this is going to lead to burnout or just inconsistency with how often you're actually posting for your team. So this begs the question, how often should we be posting on social media for our teams if we're not doing it daily? Well, the realistic standard is 2 to 3 times a week is plenty enough to stay relevant. But at minimum, you can go down to 1 time a week. Now, frequency in this day and age actually matters a lot less than consistency. In fact, for my own Marketing Robots channel, I only try to post 1 time a week, and sometimes I can't even hit that deadline, so maybe it's once every 2 weeks. The main thing that matters is that you are trying to show up on a regular cadence. 1 time a week, once every 2 weeks, either one of those is fine. Your audience at least knows when to expect you. But by trying to post too frequently, you're going to have creative block, you're going to cause a lot more stress for yourself, and ultimately you're going to burn out, which doesn't end well for anybody. Being consistent shows the social media algorithm that you are there for the long haul, and that is what's going to help push your content to more people. Now, maybe we're able to stay consistent for the build season, but what happens when the robotic season is done? How do we stay consistent then? And how often should we be posting? Because of course, during the build season, you have students and mentors that are active, and so you have a larger team to work with to help you. But maybe once the season's over, it's just down to you as a mentor or maybe one student who's still kind of paying attention to robotics. And that's totally okay. Changing the frequency in which you're posting during the build season compared to the off season is totally valid. In fact, my team does it all the time. During the build season is really where you want to try to stay consistent, posting maybe 2 to 3 times a week. And in the off season, once you have less help, that's maybe when you drop it down to only 1 time a week. But there are some tricks that you can do during the build season to make it easier for you to stay consistent in the off season if you plan accordingly. So what are some of these tricks? Well, the biggest one, to be honest, is creating a bank of content you can utilize throughout the entire year. You see, during the build season, there's a lot of content you can make on a pretty simple basis because you're constantly building the robot, there's people around, you're doing outreach events, and you can make content pretty easily and just keep it flowing. But in the off season, when things die down and you only do an outreach event maybe every 2 to 3 weeks, and maybe you do some volunteering opportunities, there's not as much content to make. So what you want to do is during the build season, you can utilize your team with more members to make content that you know you're going to be posting in the off season. That way, once the season is done with, you have a bank of content that you can just schedule on a regular cadence until the next build season comes, and then you build that bank back up again. Also, it's important to realize the type of content that you're making and putting out there during the build season compared to the off season. Because the build season is active with robot building, you might focus more of your posts around the robot. But in the off season is when you really want to be targeting recruitment, potential sponsorships, and so you want to make more content tailored towards getting students to join the team, getting businesses to want to reach out and sponsor you, and just showcasing the outreach that your team is doing. So then it goes to say, once you have all this content created, how do you schedule it on a weekly occurrence? Well, the easiest weekly schedule I can think of is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday post. Monday, you could do a post about a team member or some kind of member spotlight. Wednesday's post could be a build update or robot progress. And Friday can be a post about a sponsorship or outreach moment that you've had. Now, it doesn't need to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It could be Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. In fact, again, I would recommend utilizing days where you're already at practice to make those posts because you already have everybody there anyway. But the biggest factor in general is just having a set schedule. In fact, if you want, you can even take the time right now to set your team's posting schedule and just keep it simple. If you want to see an example schedule that I've used in the past, I've got a link in the description of this video where you can check that out. So when it comes to how often you should be posting on social media for your robotics team, it really comes down to what you can consistently do, because at the end of the day, being consistent is much more important than being there all the time. If you can commit to 2 to 3 times a week, you should do so. But if only 1 time a week is what you can manage, then stay consistent with that. If you haven't seen episode 2 of this guide, I'd go check out here where I show you the exact 3-step formula you can utilize to make consistent posts every single week. As always, I'll see you in the next one.